The only one of my friends my parents managed to get along with, at least a little, was Lyoka. I had known him since first grade, and he was probably the only person I could truly trust in a difficult situation. Unlike my parents, who found it easier to scold me for my mistakes than to teach me how not to make them, Lyoka was always ready to help and give advice. He had far more life experience than I did. He grew up without a father. He started working at 14 and somehow still found time to go out with girls. Naturally, I envied him, but not in a malicious way. On the contrary, I was genuinely happy for his success on all fronts of life. There was only one thing he was unlucky with. His mother was an alcoholic. She drank away half of the child support and used the rest to buy food for Lyoka. Still, he had something I never had growing up: freedom. A year after he came of age, his mother passed away. The apartment went to Lyoka. A week ago, he came over to my place in the evening. My parents had gone to the theater, so the house was ours for the next 3 hours. We weren't even thinking about throwing a party. We knew exactly how that could end. There was no point in having one at Lyoka's place either. Despite being 19, my father was categorically against me spending the night anywhere but home. So Lyoka's idea of buying me a cheap apartment on the outskirts of the city sounded very appealing. My parents didn't skimp on allowance, and I knew how to save, putting most of it aside for a rainy day. I doubt I can afford anything decent, I said. You can. Lyoka smiled. Not just decent, brand new. In a new building. Funny, I muttered, my voice sounding discouraged. I'm serious, Lyoka said firmly. Yves already thought everything through. He told me about a neighbor who had done exactly that and was now living happily ever after. Your money is more than enough for a small apartment in an old 5-story building on the outskirts, he explained. Built back in Soviet times. The builders screwed up the foundation. Cracks formed along the walls, mold appeared. The heating went to hell. The building was declared unsafe and scheduled for demolition. The residents are supposed to be relocated to new buildings. So you're suggesting I live in a dump that could collapse on my head at any moment? I asked irritably. Oh, come on, Lyoka snapped. You'll be there for less than a month. It won't have time to collapse. And the relocation is guaranteed. You'll get a 2-room apartment in a new building for free. How's that for motivation? I told him I'd think about it and give him my decision the next day. I needed to discuss it with my parents and prepare myself mentally for the purchase if they agreed. The conversation at home was long. I gave countless arguments in favor of the idea and explained Lyoka's plan several times. Eventually, my mother supported me and my father followed. More likely, he agreed just to get me off his back. But I didn't care. I was happy. The next day, I went to see Lyoka. He showed me a listing he'd found online a few days earlier. The asking price was slightly less than what I had saved. The seller turned out to be a reasonable young guy, a bit older than us. He had inherited the apartment from a grandmother he barely knew and had no emotional attachment to the place. He put it up for sale the day after receiving the inheritance. The apartment was on the 4th floor. A metal door stood out against the peeling, graffiti-covered walls. But what lay behind it wasn't much better. The smell suggested that local cats had spent the best years of their lives there. Wallpaper was peeling in places. Instead of a chandelier in the hallway, there was a single dim light bulb. The kitchen window was cracked in the lower corner. Luckily, it was summer, so spending 2 weeks there didn't mean freezing to death. The larger room had access to a balcony. There was an old TV and a couch, the one the grandmother had died on. We immediately folded it up and covered it with a sheet. We weren't superstitious, but sitting where someone had died didn't feel right. The second room had a wardrobe, a bed, and a nightstand. Livable, Lyoka smiled. Maybe I could stay with you? I asked. The apartment's registered in my name anyway, so it'll get relocated regardless. Well, about that, Lyoka hesitated. I'm not living alone anymore. Remember Liza from the parallel group? That explained everything. I'd have to live here. At least the apartment had basic amenities, and a solid metal door separated me from the outside world. Going back to my parents didn't sit right with my conscience, and I didn't want to see my father's face, full of disappointment at his son's helplessness and lack of independence. By evening, we moved my belongings from my parents' place, and Lyoka left. For dinner, I had only tap water, so I decided to go to the store. The building stood somewhat apart from the others, making the walk take a while. When I came back, it was already dark. The streetlights were on. Near the entrance, I noticed a silhouette. After hesitating for a moment, I approached. "Who are you?" the silhouette asked in a woman's voice. "I live here," I replied, turning away from the entrance door. The figure stubbed out a cigarette and stepped closer. She was a woman of short height, middle-aged, surprisingly well-preserved for her age, but with a smoker's voice. "Ludmilla," she said, offering her hand. "Sergey," I replied. "How long have you been here, Sergey?" "Moved in today." "And you?" "All my life. Am not going anywhere. Those bureaucratic scum think they can just throw us out. They promise new apartments, but we'll end up with a bed in a dorm at best." She took a drag. "But it won't be that easy. I'd rather stay here even if that crack runs straight through my apartment." "Many people still live here?" I asked politely. "No, just me and Boris Anatolyevich. He served in the Navy, got his apartment for years of service. Later his daughter and her family died in a car accident. Now he's alone, lives on the 5th floor." We talked a bit longer, until another silhouette emerged from the darkness of the yard. His posture was straight, his step firm, but the limp and heavy breathing betrayed his age. "Meet Boris Anatolyevich," Ludmilla said. He stepped into the light, a gray-haired man with a mustache. I held out my hand, but he didn't respond. His eyes were anxious, troubled by something. I didn't ask. "Don't open the door at night," the old man said sternly. "The door?" I repeated. He didn't answer and hurried up the stairs. Ludmilla and I exchanged glances. There were no answers. Eventually, we went our separate ways. For some reason, his warning bothered me. That night, I locked the metal door with all the bolts and even secured the door to my room with a latch. I couldn't fall asleep for a long time. New place, new thoughts. The old man's words kept spinning in my head. Probably senile, I thought, and eventually calmed down. I was woken in the middle of the night by a loud crash from the apartment above, as if something heavy was being dragged across the floor. Then came heavy footsteps. Another crash. Finally, something glass shattered. I got out of bed and knocked on the radiator with my watch strap. The noise stopped. The rest of the night passed quietly. In the morning, before heading to university, I met Ludmilla near the entrance and asked about the apartment above mine. Smiling, she said, "Boris Anatolyevich. Advanced dementia. Moves furniture around." I nodded, smiled back, and went to class. The day passed as usual. After lectures, I stopped by Lyoka's place, met Liza, and stayed until evening. I returned home late. Under the streetlights near the entrance stood another silhouette. "How was your day, Ludmilla?" I smiled. She didn't answer. She looked at me with fear in her eyes. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "Sergey, I don't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I just got back from work. I was standing here smoking. Then I looked at my window, and the light was on." She swallowed hard. And then, click, it went out. "What if someone's in there?" "Oh, come on," I smiled. "This building's older than both of us combined. The wiring's probably acting up. Could you check?" She asked quietly, handing me her keys. I cursed myself for agreeing, but it was too late to back out. I had a pepper spray on me, which gave me some confidence. The apartment door was locked. With a trembling hand, I opened it and turned on the hallway light. No one. I checked the kitchen, the living room, the bedroom. Empty. I didn't want to go back downstairs, so I decided to shout to Ludmilla through the window. She looked up, relieved, and came inside. She offered tea, but I politely refused and went back to my apartment. About an hour later, I was sitting at my laptop watching a series. The window was wide open, and I could hear everything outside. Drunk voices passing by, distant cars. Suddenly, I heard a scream. A woman's scream. I jumped up and looked out the window. No one. Another scream. Then I realized it was coming from our building. Everything clicked. My body froze, as if turning to ice, before a ringing, suffocating terror washed over me. Could only be Ludmilla. Who could hurt her? A husband? Did she even have one? She was 40 and alone. An ex-husband? But if she hadn't opened the door, then where? I froze. I hadn't checked the bathroom. The thought slammed into my brain. I snapped out of it, grabbed my phone, and hid behind the curtain to see who might leave the building, to identify the suspect for the police if needed. The dispatcher said a patrol was already on its way. The police car arrived in 10 minutes. No one had left the building. 3 officers rushed inside, 1 stayed outside. I waved to him and gave the apartment number so they could take my statement. They knocked on my door. 2 detectives entered, recorded everything I told them, then asked me to come along. Ludmilla's body was in the bathroom. A trail of blood stretched from the tub to the kitchen window. She must have tried to call for help or escape. The cause of death couldn't be determined on the spot. No wounds. Blood was coming from her mouth, and her fingernails were broken, as if she had been fighting someone. The door had to be forced open, which meant the killer had access to the apartment. The investigator's theory was that the murderer escaped through the attic and exited on the opposite side of the building, toward the forest. I couldn't bear to spend the night alone. I called Lyoka and asked him to come over. Reluctantly, he agreed. Liza was staying at her own place, so nothing held him back. I didn't tell the police about the senile old man upstairs. What was the point? They'd interrogate him and he'd just start moving furniture, I thought. The night passed quietly until around 4 in the morning. I heard the familiar crashing upstairs, a quiet, almost whispering voice, then glass hitting a wall and loud stomping, as if the old man were jumping in place. 5 minutes later, it stopped. I fell asleep. In the morning, Lyoka shared his impressions. "First, you make me sleep on the floor so I can't fall asleep half the night," he complained. "And then some idiot wakes me up by jumping around in the middle of the night." "You heard it too?" I smiled. "That's my neighbor upstairs. A senile old man." "Upstairs?" Lyoka froze. "So you've got a crazy old guy living above you, and you made me come here in the dark? What if he killed that woman?" I shuddered. Images flooded my mind. Him coming downstairs, opening her door, hiding in the bathroom, waiting until the defenseless woman came home alone and decided to take a shower. "Stop it," I said. "He can barely breathe. He couldn't kill anyone." The day flew by. Only 2 classes. I returned home early. Ludmilla's brother came to the apartment. I met him on the landing and asked about her family. He said she never had one. Life hadn't been kind to her. He lived in another city and came only for the funeral. I spent the rest of the day at home watching series. I went to bed early, in a low mood. That night, the noise upstairs returned. Stronger, more frequent, as if someone were trying to break through the floor. I barely slept. I woke up very early. Lyoka's words wouldn't leave my mind. Could the old man really be capable of something like that? I finally decided to call the police. The patrol arrived an hour later. They scolded me for not telling them earlier about all the residents. They even threatened me with charges for withholding information. The investigator decided to question the old man immediately. I was told to come along as a witness. We knocked on the door for a long time. No answer. They broke the door down. It was wooden. Inside was a tidy apartment. Portraits of Boris Anatolyevich and his family hung on the walls. But the old man himself was nowhere to be seen. The bedroom door was closed. The investigator knocked. Silence. He ordered it broken down as well. The door came off its hinges. Boris Anatolyevich sat in an armchair in front of a large mirror. Pale, bald, emaciated. Around him lay clumps of gray hair, either torn out or pulled out by himself. Shards of glass smeared with blood littered the floor. His eyes were open, fixed on the reflection of the doorway in the mirror. He was looking straight at us. An ambulance was called. The old man was taken away. I stayed home and didn't go to university. I called Lyoka, no answer. The loneliness and fear were unbearable. That night, I locked all the doors and windows, slept with the light on, and somehow drifted off. At dawn, I woke up, staring at the ceiling, then came crashing from upstairs, jumping, running. Morning workout, I thought. The realization hit seconds later. I jumped out of bed and called the police. The waiting felt endless. The noise faded. A police car arrived. They searched the apartment above. No one. I packed my laptop, money, and passport. An officer stayed with me while I got dressed. In my panic, ID misplaced my phone, so I had to call it from the landline, one ID never used before. On the way to Lyoka's place, the investigator told me the autopsy results. Boris Anatolyevich had been dead for at least 3 days, which meant he was already dead the day he warned us about the doors. I stayed at Lyoka's until evening while he was at university. When he came home, we decided to return to my apartment with 3 friends to collect the rest of my things. The streetlights were coming on as we approached the building. Going there in the evening was a mistake. I looked up at my windows. The light turned on for a moment and went out. I nearly fainted. I don't remember how we got back. I only remember screaming for everyone to get away from that house. Now I live with Lyoka, waiting for the building to be demolished. Recently, I found a missed call from the landline of my apartment. I threw away the SIM card along with the phone. They're not my problems anymore.